Eloise in the movie inherits her grandmother's record collection in the same way that I guess I stole my parents' record collection. But in a way, like the music, the songs sort of in a way become the time machine to go back. And in that way that you hear a song of that period and it sends you sort of tumbling back to the past. So that was the idea. Every time that Eloise travels back to the 60s, it is through a song.
What brings you down then?
I'm studying London College of Fashion.
Room is on the top floor.
It's perfect. I love it. If I could live any place and any time, I'd live here in London in the 60s.
I think we would like to start by asking you, there's this quote that's going on in Last Night in Soho all the time, which is, you have to start somewhere. And we would like to start there. Do you remember, for you, what was that somewhere? Whether, everyone who has a dream has to start somewhere, whether it is fashion design, singing, or filmmaking. What was that somewhere for you?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I guess I guess in a way, like sort of how it started for me was that I started making like amateur films when I was a kid, like, with my school friends. So that in a way was like the start of it, was that my parents had got me and my brother this secondhand Super 8 camera. And I was inspired by the story of like Sam Raimi making The Evil Dead as a sort of teenager. And as a 14-year-old, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. So sort of the first thing I did was get my friends from school together to make like a really, really silly short film. And I guess that was the start, was me and my friends goofing around in a field making a movie.
Last night, I saw something in my dreams.
I'm really curious about the 60s inspiration. You showed us, as you said, a darker side from the good old days. Let's talk about nostalgia. Can you recall what were those elements that planted the seed for the idea of this movie, about telling this story of someone obsessed with another time and how not everything is as really good as it seems?
Well, my obsession with the decade started with my parents' record collection. They used to have just one box of records that were all 60s albums. And I think they stopped buying albums when my brother was born because they didn't have any 70s albums. So I was born in 1974. And I guess the 60s were sort of an obsession because I had missed that decade. And it always seemed like, from my side of things, a bit cooler than what was happening right now. And through the music and the fashion and the film and the art. And then, like getting older, I would think about time traveling back to the 60s a lot and thinking, wouldn't it have been cool to go to that show, or wouldn't it have been cool to, be at that gig? But then the more you start to think about it, you start to worry that, is that a problem? Is nostalgia itself like a failure to deal with the present day? Why am I thinking about going back in time so much? Why can't I just enjoy the present? And that sort of like started to kind of inspire the movie, even in the sense of like, you can't have it both ways. You can't have the good without the bad. And also the idea of like the good old days, the idea that there's a decade where everything was great and nothing was bad, is obviously, a fallacy. And that everything that's bad now is just as bad then, if not in some cases a lot worse. So that was something that started to kind of like, the idea of that haunted me, of where a dream could turn into a nightmare, is that you could go back, but then as things start to get darker, it's difficult for you to get off the roller coaster.